Portrait of a Hamster. Boats, boats, boats. Just about all we talked about in room 26 had to do with boats. There was a math problem about a boat race and a history lesson about Vikings, who were great sailors and wore impressive hats with horns on them. There were also those lovely vocabulary words. And there was a story. Every day, Mrs. Brisbane read another exciting chapter from the book. Uncle Jolly Roger, who did seem unusually jolly for a pirate, taught Vic and V, that's what he called Victor and Violet, all kinds of wonderful things about sailing. They even had a run-in with a huge whale. That part of the story gave I Heard That Kirk chance to tell this joke. What do you call a baby whale? A little squirt. We all chuckled at that. So in just a few short days, I went from never thinking about boats to thinking about them all the time. There were so many kinds of wonderful boats, from rowboats you move with oars and muscles to sailboats and tall ships powered by the wind. And then there were motorboats, yachts, tugboats, and ferries, which all have engines. And there were the great ships powered by steam. Mrs. Brisbane brought in more books about boats and put huge posters on the wall. It would be hard to choose a favorite, but the Chinese junk did catch my eye. That boat isn't junk at all, but a beautiful craft with colorful sails. I could almost feel the sea breeze tickle my whiskers whenever I looked at the picture. In the evenings, I tried to talk to Og about boats and pirates and treasure, but as soon as I'd bring up the subject, he'd dive into his tank and swim around. Maybe he was trying to tell me that he didn't need a boat to make his way through the water. I was a little jealous, although I still wouldn't want to be a frog. As nice as Og is, he has googly eyes and green skin and no soft fur at all. I occupied my spare time by drawing pictures of boats in my little notebook. I must admit my drawing at the SS Golden Hamster, complete with a hamster flag, was quite impressive. On Friday, it was time to find out which of my friends would take me home from the weekend. Do you have permission slip, Gail? Mrs. Brisbane asked. Gail pulled out a slightly crumpled paper out of her pocket. Here it is, she said with a giggle. So I was going home with Gail. Since Gail loved to laugh so much, I was bound to have a fun weekend. Yippee! I was so happy to see that she was taking home a stack of books of boats. Gail's mom, Mrs. Morganson, came to pick us up. She was a colorful human who wore blue jeans, an orange sweater with red flowers on it, a yellow cap, and high red boots. Her hair was in a long braid halfway down her back. You know what, Humphrey? I think I'm going to paint you this weekend, she said. Oh, dear, Mrs. Morganson seemed like a nice person, but the thought of being all covered in wet and messy paint didn't sound fun to me. It won't be easy, Gail warned her. He won't stand still. Mrs. Morganson just smiled. I'll find a way. As she carried me out of the classroom, I squeaked to Og. Wish me luck, Augie boy. I don't know what color I'll be when I come back. Maybe green like you. Boing, 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 boing. Og sounded a little upset. Maybe he liked being the only green creature in room 26. When we got to the house, instead of painting me, Gail's mom gave me the carrots and gently set my cage on the nightstand in Gail's room. When we were alone, Gail curled up her bed, her stack of books. Suddenly, there was a thundering sound like a herd of wild horses coming into the room. Humphrey! It was Gail's brother, Simon. I'd met him once before when I stayed at the house. He was just about as tall as Gail, but she still called him her little brother. How's it going, Humphrey? What's new? What's happening? Look at your wheel. Can I feed you? Want out of your cage? That was how Simon talked. Fast. Simon! Humphrey's my class hamster. I'll feed him and take care of him. Gail scolded him. Aw, I just wanted to say hi. Hiya, Humphrey. Then Simon made a funny face, sticking his teeth out and holding his hand up in front of him. See, I'm a hamster too. You're an idiot, said Gail. Go away. Okay, said Simon, but I'll be back. As he hurried out of the room, Gail let out a big sigh. My brother, she groaned. She made a brother sound like a very bad thing. And yet, to a hamster who lives alone in a cage with a frog for a neighbor who doesn't even squeak, have a brother seemed like a very nice thing. I decided to cheer Gail up with a new trick I taught myself. Instead of getting my wheel and spinning it, I lay down on my back underneath it, then reached my paws up and made the wheel spin with my feet. You better believe Stop Giggling Gail couldn't stop giggling at that until there was a knock at the door, and Gail's mom peeked in the room. May I come in? Mrs. Morgenstern entered, carrying a stack of books with a lot of colorful bags. hanging from her arms. Guess who went shopping today, she asked. I guess Gail's mom did. And I was right. She dumped the boxes and bag on Gail's bed. Wait till you see, she said, excitedly opening the boxes. I got you the cutest outfits. Look at this darling skirt. She held up a skirt with blue, pink, yellow, and green stripes on it. It will look great on you. Gail wrinkled her nose. But Mom, I like pants from school. I mean, at recess. Well, these tights go underneath, Mrs. Morgenstern said, held up a bright pink pair. She rummaged around in a bag. I bought 3 skirts, one with stripes, one with stars, and one with flowers. But Mom, I don't like skirts, Gal repeated. Try something new, dear, Mrs. Morgenstern pulled out a fuzzy-looking sweater, like this. Personally, I like fuzzy things like hamsters, but Gal ran her hand over the sweater and said it looked itchy. Just try it, Gal's mom. Then reached over and opened a box. I had another brilliant idea today, she announced. We're going to redo your room. Gal blinked hard. Again? In with the new, out with the old, her mom said with a smile. But we just painted it last year, Gal reminded her. And I like the blue and white stripes. 2 years ago, said her mom. It's something we can do together. It will be fun. We'll give it a whole new look. You and I could paint a mural. We could make the whole room like the universe with all the planets. Or the whole room could look like the ocean. Or, Gail sighed, I just got used to my room the way it is. Mrs. Morgenstern reached out and patted Gail's face. Honey, try and open up to new things. Change is good. Gail didn't answer. She just stared down at her blue bedspread. Her mom frowned. Tell you what, I'll leave these samples here, and you can look at them. And think about it. Think about a mural, okay? Just think about it. Sure, Mom, Gail replied. Gail didn't seem very excited about the painting her room. But I thought it was a much better idea than painting me. After Mrs. Morgenstern left, Gail stared at her striped walls for a while. She pushed the paint samples aside and picked up one of her books. She turned a lot of the pages and suddenly held up her book to my cage. Look at this ship, Humphrey, she said. It was a picture of a lovely sailboat with a billowing white sail. I like it, I squeaked. I knew that all Gail heard was squeak, 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 but she seemed to understand. It's beautiful, isn't it, she asked. Yes, I agreed. Gail sighed again. Sometimes I'd like to sail away on a ship to go far, far away, she said. To Brazil, I said with a squeak. Maybe it was more like a shriek. You could come with me, said Gail. Then she went back to her bed and her stack of books. Really, Gail's family couldn't have been nicer to me. Great snacks, a great cage clean, no jokes about my poo. Still, I was nervous about being painted. You see, I'm a golden hamster, which means I have very beautiful glossy golden fur. I never really wanted to be another color. Not red, not blue, not green. I'm not sure there are any hamsters in those colors. Humphrey, you didn't eat your carrots, Mrs. Morgenstern said later that night. I didn't have the heart to tell her that every time I saw the carrots, I thought about being painted orange. Orange is a very nice color for a sweater or a book or even a hat. Even for a pair of socks. It's not a good color for a hamster, at least in my opinion. Hi, Humphrey, want to spin on your wheel? Go on, spin it. Want to climb your tree branch? Come on, climb. It was morning and Simon was back. As much as I liked Simon, it was hard to keep up with him. Still, he was excited about everything. I wanted to make him happy, so I hopped on my wheel. This time, Gail didn't even seem to notice. She just sat on her bed, staring at pictures of boats in her books. Out, Mrs. Morgenstern said as she came into Gail's room. I'm here to paint him. Oh, Mom, Gail groaned. Can't we just take a picture? Anyone can do that, her mom answered. This is more original. Can I paint him too? Simon asked. Please? Mrs. Morgenstern smiled. Of course, we'll all paint him. Eek! If they all painted me, I'd end up looking like a rainbow, and I'd probably be a soggy mess. Og wouldn't even recognize me when I got back. Okay, said Gail, but you didn't sound that happy about it. Soon my cage was on Mrs. Morgenstern's kitchen table. Simon, Gail, and their mother all sat around with paper and paints and stared at me. Mrs. Morgenstern, who seemed like a kind and simple man, said he had errands to do and hurried out of the house before the painting even began. Okay, artist, Mrs. Morgenstern said. Feel free to paint Humphrey any way you like. He doesn't even have to look like a hamster. But I prefer to look like a hamster, I squeaked. A nice golden hamster with lovely fur and no paint at all. Thank you very much. What's he squeaking about? Simon asked. I don't know, but please, hold still, Humphrey, his mom told me. I tried to hold still, but my whiskers were quivering and my legs were shaking. I closed my eyes, waiting to feel the wet, gloppy paint on my fur. But my fur felt just fine, so after a while I opened my eyes and saw the 3 Morgensterns putting lots of lovely paint on paper. They weren't painting me at all. They were painting pictures of me. Woo, woo, woo. I was so relieved. I hopped on my wheel for a lovely spin. Humphrey, hold still, Gal told me. Oops, sorry, I squeaked. I jumped off the wheel and held as still as a lively hamster can. After a few minutes, though, my back leg started itching and my nose started twitching, and I had a little cramp in my front paw. Luckily, Mrs. Morganson said, "Well, I think I've captured our little friend. How about you?" "How about you, too?" She held up her painting to show Gail and Simon. I couldn't get a good look at it, but I could see that there wasn't anything golden about her hamster. There was yellow and blue and maybe some purple. I think this shows the true spirit of Humphrey. I didn't have time to think about my true spirit. My true spirit was yellow, blue, and purple because Simon waved his picture right in my face. "Here you are, Humphrey." Simon's painting showed an orange blob with all kinds of swirly lines, but no hamster that I could see. Mrs. Morganson leaned in to examine the picture closely. "That's very interesting, Simon. Tell me about it." "It's all squiggly because he was spinning on his wheel, like this." Simon jumped out of his chair and began twirling in a circle. "Perfectly wonderful. I see his eye in the center," said his mother. "You can stop spinning now." Then she turned to Gail. "Let's see your Humphrey." Gail held up her paper that showed a perfectly wonderful picture of me. I had 2 ears, 2 eyes, 2 front legs and paws, 2 back legs and paws, some whiskers, and lovely golden fur. "Oh," said Gail's mother. "It looks like him, doesn't it?" asked Gail. Mrs. Morganson nodded. "Yes, it looks a lot like him. It's just—" Gail seemed upset, not at all giggly. "What's wrong with it?" "It's fine, honey," her mother said. "I'd just like you to paint what you feel, not what you see. Like Simon's picture, you can feel Humphrey's energy, can't you?" Actually, Simon's picture made me feel a little queasy, while Gail's picture made me feel very handsome. Mrs. Morganson patted Gail's hand. "It's a very good picture, Gail." After her mom and brother left, Gail sat and stared at her picture for a while. "You're such a pretty color, Humphrey. Why would I make you blue?" she asked. I didn't have an answer, but it was time for me to squeak up. "I love your picture," I told her. I'll never know if she understood me, but because the phone rang and Gail ran off to answer it. The Life of a Pirate. Ah, there be a work of art, me buckos. That is the end of chapter 3.